Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and this is Billboard Breakdown. It's the calm after the storm, the time of the year where everything seems to fall back into place after the frantic reshuffling to make it appear that onslaught never really happened, and all again is right with the world. Why yes, I am actually talking about Adele taking back chunks of the chart from Justin Bieber, why do you ask? Okay, snark aside, while everybody predicted that there'd be chunks of Adele's new album breaking onto the Hot 100, it's not as pervasive as you would expect, and along with plenty of returning entries and chart shuffling, it's more indicative that Justin Bieber and to a lesser extent One Direction didn't really have the staying power they'd need to really land on that chart. Of course, that somewhat changes when you look at the top 10. Of course, Adele is still dominant. Outside of streaming, she's ruling everything, outselling her nearest competition 2-1. And bizarrely, she's not getting any more airplay gains. Now, to be fair, this isn't her fault. We're heading into the holiday season, which means Christmas music clogs up the radio for the next month or so and prevents most pop from getting any more traction. Of course, it's not stopping a song like Hello from doing really well, or a song like Justin Bieber's Sorry, which held steady at number 2 thanks to huge streaming, great sales, lots of YouTube, and the radio finally picking it up in stride. Not quite the case for Hotline Bling by Drake though, which despite stepping up to number 3, did it by holding steady on streaming and YouTube despite weakening sales and airplay. Similar case for What Do You Mean by Justin Bieber rising up to number 4, which actually lost streaming and airplay this week and didn't exactly have impressive sales. Hell, even The Hills by The Weeknd picked up to number 5 and it spent the week losing in every category, well except YouTube. The only song where the gain might actually make a little bit of sense is Stitches by Shawn Mendes going up to number 6 thanks to streaming gains, but it's slipping in airplay and sales are not solid. Well, all those gains are because Love Yourself by Justin Bieber, despite having solid sales and great streaming, has pretty much nothing else to back it up, so it dropped hard down to number 7. Beneath it, we've got Meghan Trainor regaining the top 10 with arguably her best song with Like I'm Gonna Lose You at number 8, even though John Legend completely blows her off the table, let's be honest here, and that's thanks to sales and airplay. Nothing else. Beneath that, we've got 679 by Fetty Wap and the Remy Boys wavering down to number 9 because even despite some pitiful sales and peaking airplay, streaming got a bit of a boost to prop it up, although how much longer it's gonna last is anybody's guess. And finally, we've got Here by Alessia Cara holding steady at number 10, which doesn't have great sales, but it gains on streaming and airplay are keeping it steady. It'll be interesting to see if this becomes the anti-Christmas music song that we really all need at this point. And on that note of negativity, losers and dropouts. And here's the funny thing. Justin Bieber and One Direction already did a number on the ladder, and thus there's a certain irony that so many of their songs exited the charts the next week. Along the way though, they managed to push out Break Up With Him by Old Dominion and Let You See a Girl by Cole Swindle, both which had lost steam and were on the way out anyway, but still a net positive overall, not complaining here. And when we flip over to the losers, it's the expected case with nearly every Bieber debut netting some serious losses. Life Is Worth Living falling down to 89, No Sense with Travis Scott hitting 78, No Pressure with Big Sean hits 74, Company slips down to 73, Purpose tumbles down to 62, Mark My Words stumbles to 60, The Feeling with Halsey collapses down to 46, and I'll Show You shrinks back to 31. In an interesting change of pace, even despite dropping his debut album, Blase by Ty Dolla $ign with Future and Ray Shrimmer fell down to 76. Outside all those, the rest of the losses make a little bit more sense. Renegades by X-Ambassadors skids down to 38, as people seem to be finally getting as bored with it as I am, and Tennessee Whiskey by Chris Stapleton falls down to 80 as the CMA sales boost finally ends. The one loss that really surprised me is Where They From by Missy Elliott and Pharrell falling hard down to 72. You'd think that the comeback would have had more long-term viability, but in reality, the song just didn't catch on much more. What did catch are our returning songs and gains, and make no mistake, we had a lot of both flooding up to replace the Bieber here. Dibs by Kelsey Ballerini surging back to 94. Ginza by J Balvin going up to 95. Stand By You by Rachel Platten soaring back to 91. Play No Games by Big Sean featuring Chris Brown and Ty Dolla $ign climbing back to 99. And most interestingly, Used to Love You by Gwen Stefani rising up to 79, which I suspect came from a combination of The Voice and Ellen to give it a boost. As for her gains, the first welcome surprise is how much One Direction managed to consolidate their presence here, with Perfect rising up to 27 and Drag Me Down jumping back up to 30 from their losses last week. And speaking of losses, I actually missed the slip after the debut of Coldplay's Adventure of a Lifetime, but it recovered in a big way up to 53, just in time for the album dropping this week, and yes, I'll I'll be covering soon, don't worry here. That sense of recovery also spread to In the Night by The Weeknd, which is almost entirely being propped up by radio as the next single as it surged up to 54. I have to imagine it's a similar case for Stressed Out by 21 Pilots rising to 57. It's doing incredibly well on alternative radio, but pretty much nowhere else. Outside of that, we got a selection of songs that are recovering whether we want them to or not. Say It by Tory Lanez continuing its rise to 37. My House by Flo Rida recovering nicely to 83. Hideaway by Daya somehow sticking around to 61. Roses by the Chainsmokers featuring Roses boost up to 51. And most distressingly, Bet You Can't Do It Like Me by D-Lo continuing the trend of bad Vine challenges going up to 45. Let's pray this is a trend that dies in 2015 where it belongs. And finally, the one new arrival from last week that pitched up a lot of steam, I Know What You Did Last Summer by Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello, a song that frankly deserves to be in the hands of two more experienced singers to really land an impact, at least for me, but it went up to 57. Now that will take us to our new arrivals on the charts, starting with number 100, Rich Sex by Future.
When you look down, see my chains on. When you look down, see my chains on. When you ride on me, see my chains on. When you ride on me, keep my chains on. Baby, we can go and have rich sex. Baby girl, go and have rich sex. You ain't never ever had rich sex. You ain't never ever had rich sex.
So you knew that it was inevitable that Future would eventually try to break onto the Hot 100 with a hit of his own off Dirty Sprite 2 that doesn't feature Drake, which landed here thanks to the video. I was just expecting that it would actually be interesting as a song. Rich Sex, meanwhile, is exactly what it sounds like. Future screwing some girl covered in brand names and jewelry over a bass-heavy trap beat. I'll give the song the barest hint of credit and say that the backing synth does have a certain elegance to it, but to me the brand name pileup just feels kind of gaudy and a bit tacky, the cheapest way possible to emphasize wealth. Overall, I can't say it's outright offensive or miserable like some of Future's material off of Dirty Sprite 2, but it certainly is bland and played out, especially coming after a year which had entirely too much Future in it. Next, number 98, Best Friend by Young Thug.
And that's my bestie, my bestie, my best friend. Go best friend. Nigga living TTG and everything is still on fleek. Bad bitch rolling with me, she gon' smile cause she on fleek. $100,000 out my pay, my shit on bleed. Yeah.
You know, my opinion on Young Thug really has begun to evolve over the past year, from outright dislike to more of a sense that I should try to like this guy a lot more than I do. I'm not gonna deny he's got charisma and an interesting voice and occasionally a decent flow, but I kept feeling like he's missing his mark in terms of content and production. The best thing that he's ever done is still Good Times at Jamie XX and Popcan earlier this year off of In Color, and I get the feeling that he's only a shade away from falling into a similar lane as Chance the Rapper, just a little bit weirder and more eccentric, and I can dig that. As it is, it seems like with his frequent mixtape releases, he's still being positioned as a successor to Lil Wayne, with this track coming from his September tape, Slime Season, and honestly, it's pretty damn awful. I think a big part of that is the production with the plucked strings swamped out by the bass and what sounds like screams punctuating the mix. It's way too dark to fit with this rambling free verse subject matter that mostly focuses on screwing girls, both his and yours, and about his newfound success allowing him to be forcing Yoho, I can't wait to mislead him and beat him. Okay. You know, I like to go on about how there's plenty of rhymes in the song that completely don't connect, and that the scattershot flow can barely stay on topic. He talks about cereal at one point, but this is a song where Young Thug is bragging about misleading, screwing, and beating your girl. You know, Young Thug, it's apropos you call your crew the Slime Army, because blatant incompetence and lines like that make you out to appear like pure scum. Fine work, you clearly deserve all that critical acclaim. Number 97, Home Alone Tonight by Luke Bryan featuring Karen Fairchild.
I'll send it to my ex and send them both a text saying we ain't going home alone tonight. Girl, you ain't gotta, I ain't gotta go home alone tonight.
And on the topic of flagrant douchebaggery, we now have one of the worst songs from Luke Bryan's Kill the Lights, a record that oddly seems to have not caught on nearly as well as his previous albums have, mostly because you can barely consider this country and it's also pretty damn awful. And really, it's a matter of tone and writing why the song doesn't work. Yeah, I could rant about how the stiff percussion and gleaming haze completely swamps out the sour guitar melody, or how Karen Fairchild of Little Big Town sounds completely checked out in the song, but the larger issue is that this is a track about this hookup solely happening for them them to send selfies to their exes in a bitter stab at revenge. And you know, I could almost buy it if this song was framed about two miserable people trying desperately to deal with their losses through sheer pettiness, but there's nothing in the writing that provides any sort of deeper subtext, so we just get pure ugliness all around. It's not even enough fire or passion to make the melodramatic revenge sex interesting. Plus, you know, this is not country music. Number 87, Remedy by Adele.
And your heart makes you feel like a fool. I promise you will see that I will be your remedy.
So okay, here's the reason why we only have 4 Adele songs this week instead of the full avalanche of tracks you got from Bieber last Tuesday. Priorities. See, Adele made it very clear that she was not going to be releasing 25 to streaming. People actually had to buy the CD. So where Justin Bieber flooded the charts with not just streaming but full videos to support each song, these songs hit the charts entirely on sales and airplay. And we start out with one that I easily find the least interesting, and I blame that entirely on the production. Now don't get me wrong, it's not bad at all, especially compared with the 3 songs that I just covered. But Ryan Tedder's airy, clean piano tone just doesn't do as much compared to her other piano ballads, especially on 25. Granted, it's also a song that's intended for Adele's baby son, so I imagine if I gave this song to my mom, she'd probably appreciate it a lot more. But as a whole, while it's a good song, it's not quite a great one. At least for me. Number 79, Send My Love to Your New Lover by Adele. Well, I'm not surprised this charted, as it's easily Adele's most commercial song that she's ever done, mostly thanks to getting Max Martin to help out in the writing and production. And it definitely shows in the writing and the composition. The lumpy beat, the awkward rhythm in the chorus with the hand clap, the lack of melodic focus, the vocal production that doesn't really give Adele more room to breathe. It was easily my least favorite song off of 25. And here's my main point here. Given how Adele was shattering sales records, why she would ever bother to make a song that leans towards the mainstream with production that sounds more fit for Shawn Mendes than her? Why would she even bother? It's not like she needs that. Case in point, number 70, Water Under the Bridge by Adele.
Don't pretend that you don't want me. I'll love you, water under the bridge. If you're gonna let me down gently. Don't pretend that you don't want me. I'll love you, water under the bridge.
Okay, yeah, you could definitely argue this track was also more commercial with the rubbery guitar roll up against the piano that honestly reminds me a little bit of that opening riff on Toto's Africa, but at least this track nails the groove and the hook a lot more effectively, with the vocal production giving Adele a lot more room to breathe, with some pretty damn great multi-tracking. Upon repeated listens, the heavy drums do feel a little bit thin and hollow to me, but so much of that is compensated for by the writing, which shows a relationship just sputtering out where Adele, she knows it's over, and yet all she wants is the acknowledgement that it actually mattered in the first place, that relationship. Honestly, I really like that sentiment. It shows maturity and yet enough vulnerability to hope that things had been worth it. And when relationships end, in retrospect, that's the best thing you can expect. So yeah, definitely one of my favorite songs off of 25, but not quite my favorite or on the level of number 22, When We Were Young by Adele.
Just like a movie, it was just like a song.
You know, initially I was inclined to say this was Adele's version of the old-fashioned vintage worship that we normally get on Lana Del Rey or maybe Taylor Swift's Wildest Dreams. But for this complicated piano ballad reunion, Adele's diving beneath all that glamour and flash to the complicated emotions that come with reuniting with an old flame unexpectedly. It touches in onto those emotions that come with having feelings you thought were long buried rushing back raw to the surface. A relationship that broke because age was pushing them towards a commitment, and while Adele feels herself aging away from that perfect time, for him, nothing looks to have changed. And here's the thing, it's clear that this guy has moved on, he's happy with his life, and Adele on some level she understands that. She just wants to capture the moment, possibly that last fragment before it all inevitably fades, and that's just kind of heartbreaking. And it's also the sort of track where I really struggle to find anything really wrong with it. I guess I'm not wild how they fade out Adele's raw belting after the first part of the final chorus behind the backing vocals, but that's a minor nitpick. Beyond that, if this song sticks around, and I can't imagine why it wouldn't, we've got our earliest frontrunner from my favorite hit song of 2016, because this track, it's definitely something special. So yeah, this week, the best and the worst, shockingly easy. Of course, Adele's When We Were Young and Water Under the Bridge take best of the week and honorable mention respectively, whereas for the worst, well, I was planning on giving it to Home Alone Tonight by Luke Bryan and Karen Fairchild, but they scraped the dishonorable mention because Young Thug's Best Friend is taking the worst for sloppy writing, some extremely questionable implications, and production that's not good enough to save either. And yet, even with that, I got a good feeling about the weeks up ahead. Things seem to be finally looking up, and I'm looking forward to that. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.